The clatter of silverware against china, usually a comforting symphony at Sunday dinner, sounded like a cacophony of judgment to Agnes. At 65, a widow for 5 years, she was supposed to be settling into a quiet rhythm of retirement, perhaps tending her rose bushes, joining a bridge club, or at the very least, enjoying the fruits of her late husband Harold's modest pension. Her children, Michael and Amanda, both successful in their own right, had made these expectations abundantly clear. Michael, with his perfectly tailored suits and a career in agricultural equipment sales, envisioned her days filled with leisurely cruises. Amanda, a sharp corporate attorney, had even subtly hinted at brochures for quote, active senior living communities. But Agnes, with her steel-spined resolve, honed by decades of quiet observation and meticulous planning, was about to shatter their carefully constructed assumptions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I've decided to take a job, Agnes announced, her voice cutting through the polite hum of conversation about Michael's latest sales quota and Amanda's ongoing divorce proceedings. The words hung in the air, a small, unassuming bomb. Michael choked on his sweet tea, a sound somewhere between a gasp and a cough. Amanda, ever the picture of composure, slowly lowered her fork, a perfectly roasted potato poised precariously on its tines. "A job, Mom?" Michael managed, his brow furrowing with a mixture of confusion and concern. "At 65? What kind of job? We thought you were going to focus on your garden this year." "The hydrangeas are looking particularly vibrant." Agnes offered a small, knowing smile. "A janitor job, actually, at the old Millbrook Tower downtown." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the steady tick of Harold's old grandfather clock in the corner, the one she couldn't bring herself to move since he'd passed. The fried chicken had grown cold, the mashed potatoes forming a skin, but nobody seemed to notice. Michael's face, usually a canvas of confident salesmanship, went pale. Amanda's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose so high they almost disappeared into her hairline. "A janitor job?" Amanda finally echoed, her voice sharp, professional, the same tone she probably used when cross-examining a particularly recalcitrant witness. "Mom, with all due respect, you managed the entire administrative department for Millbrook High for 45 years. You balanced budgets, organized events, handled rebellious teenagers. You were practically the backbone of that school. Why on earth would you take a janitor job now?" Agnes smoothed her napkin across her lap, her fingers tightening imperceptibly around her tea glass. "It's a means to an end, dear, and it offers a unique perspective." Michael leaned forward, his expression one of someone explaining basic math to a particularly slow child. "Mom, you're 65. This is the retirement stage. The stage where you're supposed to be enjoying your golden years, not scrubbing toilets." He gestured vaguely with his hand, as if the very idea was too distasteful to name. The word scrubbing hit her like a physical blow, a dismissal of her capabilities, a reduction of her dreams to something menial and undignified. For 45 years, Agnes had managed impossible budgets, dealt with irate parents, navigated bureaucratic obstacles, and somehow kept Millbrook High School running. She had buried a husband, raised 2 children, and maintained a household through economic recessions and personal crises. But her son thought her dreams were fantasies, or worse, a sign of senility. "It's about opportunity," Agnes said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The Millbrook Tower. It's been sitting half-empty for years, neglected, undervalued." Amanda's laugh was sharp, professional, the same laugh she probably used when clients suggested unrealistic merger terms. "Mom, walking through an old building isn't the same as understanding commercial real estate. You've been watching too many of those fixer-upper shows on television." Heat rose in Agnes's cheeks. She stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor, and walked to the built-in hutch that had belonged to Harold's grandmother. From behind a stack of photo albums, she withdrew a manila folder, thick with papers, blueprints, and printed articles. She set it on the table with a soft thud. "Certified Property Management course," she said, opening the folder. Online. Completed last year. And this. She pulled out another document. Commercial Real Estate Investment Strategies. A correspondence course from the University of Georgia Extension. Her children stared, their professional masks slipping slightly to reveal genuine surprise. And this, she unfolded a bank statement, is my savings account. Harold's life insurance, plus what I've saved from my pension over the past 3 years. $230,000. Michael's face went pale. Amanda's mouth opened slightly, then closed. I've been planning this since before your father died. Agnes continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. He knew about the courses, the research. He encouraged me. She touched the edge of Harold's picture on the sideboard. Said it was never too late to build something new. Mom. Michael's voice had lost its condescending edge, replaced by something that sounded almost panicked. That's your nest egg, your security. You can't just throw it away on some what, Michael? Some dream that doesn't fit your idea of what a 65-year-old woman should want? Amanda recovered first, sliding back into her attorney mode. It's not about age, Mom. It's about risk management. Starting any business is risky, but at your point in life, you need stability, security. What if it fails? What if you get hurt? What if your health? My health is fine for now, Agnes interrupted. But what happens when it's not? When you need assisted care? Amanda's voice took on the gentle but firm tone she probably used with difficult clients. We've been meaning to talk to you about that. There's a lovely facility in Monroe, very well regarded. They have activities, social programs. Activities? The word came out like something distasteful. You want to put me somewhere to make pottery and play bingo until I die? We want you to be safe, Michael said, and realistic. Mom, I'm barely keeping my head above water with the twins' college tuition and the mortgage. Amanda's going through her divorce. We can't, if something happens to you, if this building thing goes south, we can't bail you out. There it was, the truth beneath their concern. They were worried about their inheritance, about the possibility that they might have to take care of her if she failed. Agnes felt something cold settle in her chest, a weight she hadn't felt since those first lonely months after Harold's death. I see. She closed the folder carefully, her movements deliberate. So you'd rather I sit in my rocking chair counting my money like some old miser, waiting to die so you can inherit what's left? That's not fair. Amanda protested. We love you, we worry about you living alone in this big house with these unrealistic ideas. Unrealistic? Agnes tasted the word, found it bitter. Because I'm too old to have ideas at all? Michael reached across the table, his face earnest. Mom, we're not saying that. We're saying be practical. Enjoy your retirement. Travel. Join the church auxiliary. Find a nice book club, like Mrs. Henderson down the street, spending her days watching soap operas and complaining about her arthritis. Agnes shook her head. That's not living, Michael. That's waiting to die. But taking a janitor job at 65, with plans to buy the entire building? Colonel Sanders was 62 when he franchised KFC. Laura Ingalls Wilder didn't publish her first Little House book until she was 64. Grandma Moses started painting at 78. Agnes's voice grew stronger with each example. Age is just a number, unless you let other people make it a prison. Amanda sighed, the sound filled with professional patience. Mom, those are exceptions. Outliers? Most people your age, most people my age, do what their children expect them to do. They shrink themselves down to fit into tiny boxes labeled appropriate and realistic and safe. Agnes stood up, her hands flat on the table. I won't do it. But Mom. No. The word came out with the authority of someone who'd spent decades managing rebellious teenagers. I've listened to your concerns, I've heard your arguments. Now let me tell you something. She looked from Michael to Amanda, seeing them clearly, perhaps for the first time in years, not as her children, but as adults who had somehow learned to fear possibility more than failure. Your father and I raised you to be independent, to chase your dreams, to never let anyone tell you what you couldn't do. I'm disappointed that you've forgotten those lessons. More than that, I am hurt that you think so little of the woman who taught them to you. Michael's face flushed. We don't think little of you. We just think, you think I'm too old, too fragile, too foolish to make my own decisions. You think I should shuffle off to some nursing home and wait quietly for death, because that's what's expected of someone my age. Agnes picked up the manila folder, holding it against her chest like armor. Well, I have news for you both. I'm not done living yet. I'm not done growing, learning, or building something meaningful. Mom, please, I'm going to transform that Millbrook Tower into something amazing. Something that will revitalize this downtown, create jobs, and show this community what's possible when you stop letting other people's expectations limit your dreams. She looked at each of them in turn. You can support me, or you can keep treating me like a child who doesn't know her own mind. But you won't stop me. The grandfather clock chimed 8 o'clock, marking the end of another Sunday dinner, another failed attempt at family connection. Amanda gathered her purse, her movements sharp with frustration. Michael pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the floor like an exclamation point. We'll talk about this later, Amanda said, her lawyer voice back in place, when you've had time to think about it rationally. I've been thinking about it for 3 years, Agnes replied. Every rational thought has led me to the same conclusion. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. They left without clearing the table, without offering to help with dishes, without the usual kisses goodbye. Agnes stood at her front window, watching their taillights disappear down Maple Street, feeling more alone than she had since Harold's funeral. But as she turned back to her empty dining room, to the cold chicken and congealing gravy, she felt something else stirring beneath the loneliness. Determination. The same steel-backed resolve that had gotten her through her first year of teaching, through Harold's cancer diagnosis, through the long grief of widowhood. They'd laughed at her dreams, dismissed her capabilities, tried to shrink her down to fit their comfortable assumptions about age and appropriate behavior, but they'd also given her something valuable, even if they didn't realize it. They'd given her the fuel she needed to prove them wrong. Agnes's hands trembled slightly as she gathered the dinner plates, the weight of her children's dismissal settling into her bones like winter cold. The grandfather clock's pendulum swung back and forth, marking time that felt suddenly precious, time she couldn't afford to waste on hurt feelings or family approval. She'd spent 3 days since that disastrous Sunday dinner replaying their words, feeling the sting fresh each time. But this morning, something had shifted. She'd woken before dawn, Harold's voice echoing in her memory. Agnes, honey, the only approval you need is your own. He'd said that to her 40 years ago, when the school board questioned her innovative teaching methods. It had been true then. It was true now. By 8 a.m., she was dressed in her best navy blazer, the one she'd worn to school board meetings when she needed to project authority, and driving toward the Millbrook Tower. Her first day as a janitor. The Millbrook Tower loomed ahead of Agnes, its faded brick facade a testament to decades of neglect. Once a proud symbol of the town's ambition, it now stood as a monument to forgotten dreams. Its lower windows boarded up, its upper floors showing signs of disrepair. As Agnes pulled into the cracked parking lot, she could feel the weight of her children's skepticism, their words echoing in her mind. But beneath that weight stirred a fierce resolve. This wasn't just a janitor job. It was her reconnaissance mission, her covert operation to reclaim a piece of Millbrook's history and forge her own future. She parked her sensible Honda Civic next to a battered pickup truck and a rusty van, the vehicles of the existing maintenance crew. The front doors, once grand, were now secured with heavy chains and padlocks, accessed only through a side entrance marked Staff Only. Agnes produced a key ring from her purse, selecting one that looked far too new and shiny for such a weathered building, a master key provided by the building's distant and indifferent management company. The lock clicked open with surprising ease, and the chains fell away with a metallic clatter that echoed across the empty parking lot. Agnes pushed open the heavy steel door and stepped into what felt like a cathedral of abandonment. The vastness hit her immediately. The lobby, once a bustling hub, stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by skeletal remains of a long-abandoned reception desk and dusty, forgotten potted plants. Dust motes danced in the weak morning sunlight that streamed through the high, grimy windows, and her footsteps echoed off the polished concrete floors with a hollow resonance that spoke of emptiness and potential in equal measure. "Good heavens," Agnes whispered, her voice automatically dropping to match the reverent silence of the space. It was like stepping into a forgotten tomb. Agnes walked slowly into the center of the lobby, her sensible shoes clicking against the concrete with the rhythm of someone marking territory. She stopped and turned in a slow circle, her arms spread wide as if she could embrace the entire vision that lived in her mind. This wasn't just a building to clean, it was a canvas, a blank slate waiting for the blueprint of her defiance. Her first week was a blur of mops, buckets, and quiet observation. The existing janitorial staff, a taciturn trio named Frank, Gus, and Maria, seemed to view her with a mix of suspicion and weary amusement. Frank, a grizzled veteran with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, grunted greetings and kept to himself. Gus, younger and perpetually chewing gum, offered a reluctant nod. Maria, the youngest, with kind eyes that held a hint of curiosity, was the only one who occasionally offered a polite, "Good morning, Mrs. Miller." They were used to the silence, the slow decay of the building, the transient nature of their work. They certainly weren't used to a 65-year-old woman in a crisp uniform, meticulously cleaning corners that hadn't seen a scrub brush in years, all while carrying a small, leather-bound notebook she occasionally scribbled in. While her colleagues focused on the superficial grime, Agnes's eyes saw beyond the dust and cobwebs. She noted the robust, if outdated, electrical infrastructure, the sturdy support beams in the cavernous, unused upper floors, the surprisingly intact plumbing. Each sweep of her broom, each pass of her mop was a reconnaissance mission. She measured, she calculated, she imagined. The small notebook in her pocket wasn't for cleaning schedules. It was filled with meticulous notes on square footage, ceiling heights, load-bearing capacities, and potential access points. She was charting the building's weaknesses, yes, but more importantly, its hidden strengths. During her lunch breaks, while Frank and Gus ate their sandwiches in silence, and Maria scrolled on her phone, Agnes would find a quiet corner, pull out her laptop, the one Michael and Amanda didn't even know she owned, and delve into her research. She wasn't just cleaning. She was studying the building's history, its zoning regulations, its tax records, its current ownership structure. The Millbrook Tower was owned by a faceless, out-of-state holding company, a labyrinthine corporate entity that seemed to have forgotten the building existed. This was Agnes's first key insight: neglect bred opportunity. One afternoon, as she was polishing the tarnished brass elevator doors on the 10th floor, a floor long abandoned and filled with ghostly echoes, she heard a voice. "Mrs. Miller? What on earth are you doing up here?" It was Maria, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and concern. "This floor hasn't been cleaned in years. Nobody even comes up here." Agnes straightened, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Just exploring, dear. A good janitor knows every inch of her domain." She gestured to the vast, empty space beyond the elevator bank, where dust sheets covered forgotten office furniture, creating spectral shapes in the gloom. "This space, it has potential, don't you think?" Maria looked around, then back at Agnes, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "It's just empty offices, Mrs. Miller. Been that way since the last law firm moved out 5 years ago." "For now," Agnes murmured, more to herself than to Maria. "For now." The following Sunday, Michael and Amanda arrived for dinner, their expressions still strained from their last encounter. They tried to be polite, asking Agnes about her new routine, carefully avoiding the word janitor. "It's certainly different, Mom," Michael offered, trying to sound supportive. "Are you enjoying it? The exercise must be good for you." "It is," Agnes replied, pouring herself another glass of tea. "And it's given me a lot of time to think about the building." Amanda sighed, a barely audible puff of air. "Mom, we talked about this. It's an old building. It's probably a money pit. You need to be realistic." "Realistic?" Agnes met her daughter's gaze directly. "Do you know how many vacant commercial properties there are in Millbrook? How many businesses have left downtown? This building isn't just a money pit, Amanda. It's a symptom. And it's an opportunity. She pulled out a new set of documents from her folder. Not the certifications this time, but detailed financial projections and market analyses. The current owners are bleeding money on it. High property taxes, minimal rental income, increasing maintenance costs. They're desperate to offload it. Michael scoffed. And you think you can just waltz in and buy a commercial building? With your janitor salary? My janitor salary is for observation, Agnes corrected, her voice firm. My savings, combined with a strategic loan, will be for the acquisition, and my vision will be for the transformation. She laid out a hand-drawn site plan, her principal's organizational skills, evident in the neat lines and careful annotations. The first 3 floors can be revitalized for retail and small business incubators. The next 7 floors, that's where the real potential lies. Co-working spaces, affordable artist studios, perhaps even some residential units for young professionals looking to move back to Millbrook. Amanda stared at the drawings, her attorney's mind clearly engaged despite herself. You're talking about a significant investment, Mom, more than your $230,000. Of course, Agnes said simply. That's the down payment, the seed money. For the rest, I'll need partners. Investors who see the potential, not just the dust. Investors? Michael laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Mom, with all due respect, who's going to invest in a building project led by a 65-year-old retired principal who just took a janitor job? Someone who understands vision, Michael. Someone who isn't afraid to dream big, regardless of age or perceived status. Someone who sees beyond the surface, just like I do when I'm cleaning. Agnes's eyes held a glint of steel. I've been studying the market. There's a growing demand for revitalized downtown spaces, for community hubs. This isn't just about a building, it's about a movement. The conversation continued for hours, a tense dance between Agnes's unwavering conviction and her children's persistent skepticism. They threw every obstacle they could think of: zoning laws, construction costs, market saturation, her lack of relevant experience. But for every objection, Agnes had a meticulously researched answer, a counter-argument, rooted in facts and figures she'd gathered during her quiet hours of janitorial work. It's not just about the numbers, Mom, Amanda finally said, her voice softer, a hint of genuine worry replacing her professional detachment. It's about your health. The stress. What if you get in over your head? My health is fine, Agnes reiterated, and the stress of not living fully, of not pursuing a dream, is far greater than any construction challenge. You both worry about me, and I appreciate that. But sometimes, worrying too much can blind you to possibility. As they left that night, the usual strained goodbyes were replaced by a lingering silence. Agnes knew she hadn't convinced them. Not fully. But she had planted a seed of doubt in their certainty, a crack in their comfortable assumptions. They still saw her as a fragile, aging woman, but now, perhaps, they also saw a hint of the formidable force she truly was. Agnes returned to the Millbrook Tower the next morning, her mop and bucket feeling less like tools of servitude and more like instruments of revolution. As she meticulously cleaned the dusty windows of the vacant executive offices on the top floor, she gazed out at the sprawling town below. She saw the familiar rooftops, the distant church steeple, the main street that had once bustled with life but now showed too many empty storefronts. She saw Millbrook, her home, slowly fading. But she also saw possibility. She saw the potential for new businesses, for vibrant community spaces, for a downtown reborn. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her bones, that the Millbrook Tower, the building she was currently cleaning, would be the key. Her janitor uniform was merely a disguise, a cloak of invisibility that allowed her to move unseen, to gather intelligence, to plot her quiet, audacious takeover. They had laughed when she took a janitor job at 65. They had no idea she was already charting the course to own the entire building. The blueprint of her defiance was already being etched, one scrubbed floor at a time. The Millbrook Tower loomed ahead of Agnes, its faded brick facade a testament to decades of neglect. Once a proud symbol of the town's ambition, it now stood as a monument to forgotten dreams, its lower windows boarded up, its upper floors showing signs of disrepair. As Agnes pulled into the cracked parking lot, she could feel the weight of her children's skepticism, their words echoing in her mind. But beneath that weight stirred a fierce resolve. This wasn't just a janitor job. It was her reconnaissance mission, her covert operation to reclaim a piece of Millbrook's history and forge her own future. She parked her sensible Honda Civic next to a battered pickup truck and a rusty van, the vehicles of the existing maintenance crew. The front doors, once grand, were now secured with heavy chains and padlocks, accessed only through a side entrance marked Staff Only. Agnes produced a key ring from her purse, selecting one that looked far too new and shiny for such a weathered building. A master key provided by the building's distant and indifferent management company. The lock clicked open with surprising ease, and the chains fell away with a metallic clatter that echoed across the empty parking lot. Agnes pushed open the heavy steel door and stepped into what felt like a cathedral of abandonment. The vastness hit her immediately. The lobby, once a bustling hub, stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by skeletal remains of a long-abandoned reception desk and dusty, forgotten potted plants. Dust motes danced in the weak morning sunlight that streamed through the high, grimy windows, and her footsteps echoed off the polished concrete floors, with a hollow resonance that spoke of emptiness and potential in equal measure. "Good heavens," Agnes whispered, her voice automatically dropping to match the reverent silence of the space. It was like stepping into a forgotten tomb. Agnes walked slowly into the center of the lobby, her sensible shoes clicking against the concrete with the rhythm of someone marking territory. She stopped and turned in a slow circle, her arms spread wide as if she could embrace the entire vision that lived in her mind. This wasn't just a building to clean. It was a canvas, a blank slate waiting for the blueprint of her defiance. Her first week was a blur of mops, buckets, and quiet observation. The existing janitorial staff, a taciturn trio named Frank, Gus, and Maria, seemed to view her with a mix of suspicion and weary amusement. Frank, a grizzled veteran with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, grunted greetings and kept to himself. Gus, younger and perpetually chewing gum, offered a reluctant nod. Maria, the youngest, with kind eyes that held a hint of curiosity, was the only one who occasionally offered a polite, "Good morning, Mrs. Miller." They were used to the silence, the slow decay of the building, the transient nature of their work. They certainly weren't used to a 65-year-old woman in a crisp uniform, meticulously cleaning corners, that hadn't seen a scrub brush in years, all while carrying a small, leather-bound notebook she occasionally scribbled in. While her colleagues focused on the superficial grime, Agnes's eyes saw beyond the dust and cobwebs. She noted the robust, if outdated, electrical infrastructure, the sturdy support beams in the cavernous, unused upper floors, the surprisingly intact plumbing. Each sweep of her broom, each pass of her mop, was a reconnaissance mission. She measured, she calculated, she imagined. The small notebook in her pocket wasn't for cleaning schedules. It was filled with meticulous notes on square footage, ceiling heights, load-bearing capacities, and potential access points. She was charting the building's weaknesses, yes, but more importantly, its hidden strengths. During her lunch breaks, while Frank and Gus ate their sandwiches in silence and Maria scrolled on her phone, Agnes would find a quiet corner, pull out her laptop, the one Michael owned. Amanda didn't even know she owned, and delve into her research. She wasn't just cleaning. She was studying the building's history, its zoning regulations, its tax records, its current ownership structure. The Millbrook Tower was owned by a faceless, out-of-state holding company, a labyrinthine corporate entity that seemed to have forgotten the building existed. This was Agnes's first key insight: neglect-bred opportunity. One afternoon, as she was polishing the tarnished brass elevator doors on the 10th floor, a floor long, abandoned, and filled with ghostly echoes, she heard a voice. "Mrs. Miller? What on earth are you doing up here?" It was Maria, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and concern. "This floor hasn't been cleaned in years. Nobody even comes up here." Agnes straightened, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Just exploring, dear. A good janitor knows every inch of her domain." She gestured to the vast empty space beyond the elevator bank, where dust sheets covered forgotten office furniture, creating spectral shapes in the gloom. This space, it has potential, don't you think? Maria looked around, then back at Agnes, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. It's just empty offices, Mrs. Miller. Been that way since the last law firm moved out 5 years ago. For now, Agnes murmured, more to herself than to Maria. For now. The following Sunday, Michael and Amanda arrived for dinner, their expressions still strained from their last encounter. They tried to be polite, asking Agnes about her new routine, carefully avoiding the word janitor. It's certainly different, Mom, Michael offered, trying to sound supportive. Are you enjoying it? The exercise must be good for you. It is, Agnes replied, pouring herself another glass of tea. And it's given me a lot of time to think. About the building. Amanda sighed, a barely audible puff of air. Mom, we talked about this. It's an old building. It's probably a money pit. You need to be realistic. Realistic? Agnes met her daughter's gaze directly. Do you know how many vacant commercial properties there are in Millbrook? How many businesses have left downtown? This building isn't just a money pit, Amanda. It's a symptom. And it's an opportunity. She pulled out a new set of documents from her folder, not the certifications this time, but detailed financial projections and market analyses. The current owners are bleeding money on it. High property taxes, minimal rental income, increasing maintenance costs. They're desperate to offload it. Michael scoffed. And you think you can just waltz in and buy a commercial building with your janitor salary? My janitor salary is for observation, Agnes corrected, her voice firm. My savings, combined with a strategic loan, will be for the acquisition. And my vision will be for the transformation. She laid out a hand-drawn site plan, her principal's organizational skills evident in the neat lines and careful annotations. The first 3 floors can be revitalized for retail and small business incubators. The next 7 floors, that's where the real potential lies. Co-working spaces, affordable artist studios, perhaps even some residential units for young professionals looking to move back to Millbrook. Amanda stared at the drawings, her attorney's mind clearly engaged despite herself. You're talking about a significant investment, Mom, more than your $230,000. Of course, Agnes said simply. That's the down payment, the seed money. For the rest, I'll need partners. Investors who see the potential, not just the dust. Investors? Michael laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Mom, with all due respect, who's going to invest in a building project led by a 65-year-old retired principal who just took a janitor job? Someone who understands vision, Michael. Someone who isn't afraid to dream big, regardless of age or perceived status. Someone who sees beyond the surface, just like I do when I'm cleaning. Agnes's eyes held a glint of steel. I've been studying the market. There's a growing demand for revitalized downtown spaces, for community hubs. This isn't just about a building, it's about a movement. The conversation continued for hours, a tense dance between Agnes's unwavering conviction and her children's persistent skepticism. They threw every obstacle they could think of: zoning laws, construction costs, market saturation, her lack of, quote, relevant experience. But for every objection, Agnes had a meticulously researched answer, a counter-argument rooted in facts and figures she'd gathered during her quiet hours of, quote, janitorial work. It's not just about the numbers, Mom, Amanda finally said, her voice softer, a hint of genuine worry replacing her professional detachment. It's about your health. The stress. What if you get in over your head? My health is fine, Agnes reiterated. And the stress of not living fully, of not pursuing a dream, is far greater than any construction challenge. You both worry about me, and I appreciate that. But sometimes, worrying too much can blind you to possibility. As they left that night, the usual strained goodbyes were replaced by a lingering silence. Agnes knew she hadn't convinced them. Not fully. But she had planted a seed of doubt in their certainty, a crack in their comfortable assumptions. They still saw her as a fragile, aging woman, but now perhaps they also saw a hint of the formidable force she truly was. Agnes returned to the Millbrook Tower the next morning, her mop and bucket feeling less like tools of servitude and more like instruments of revolution. As she meticulously cleaned the dusty windows of the vacant executive offices on the top floor, she gazed out at the sprawling town below. She saw the familiar rooftops, the distant church steeple, the main street that had once bustled with life, but now showed too many empty storefronts. She saw Millbrook, her home, slowly fading, but she also saw possibility. She saw the potential for new businesses, for vibrant community spaces, for a downtown reborn. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her bones, that the Millbrook Tower, the building she was currently cleaning, would be the key. Her janitor uniform was merely a disguise, a cloak of invisibility that allowed her to move unseen, to gather intelligence, to plot her quiet, audacious takeover. They had laughed when she took a janitor job at 65. They had no idea she was already charting the course to own the entire building. The blueprint of her defiance was already being etched, one scrubbed floor at a time. Agnes spent the next few weeks at the Millbrook Tower, her janitor job serving as the perfect cover. She meticulously cleaned, yes, but her real work involved observing, sketching, and quietly gathering every piece of information about the building. She noted the consistent leak in the boiler room, the outdated elevator mechanisms, the way the old wiring hummed with a barely contained inefficiency. Every creak, every draft, every shadow whispered secrets to her, revealing the tower's long-suffering neglect. She wasn't just scrubbing floors. She was uncovering the building's soul, understanding its ailments, and envisioning its rebirth. Her children's dismissive words still echoed in her mind, but they fueled her determination, each wipe of a dusty windowsill a silent act of defiance. She knew she couldn't do this alone. Her research had led her to a name, Elias Vance. He was a commercial real estate developer, not from Millbrook, but from a bustling city 2 hours north. Elias had made a name for himself transforming neglected historical buildings into vibrant modern spaces. His reputation preceded him, a shrewd negotiator, yes, but also a visionary who believed in the power of preserving architectural heritage while injecting new life into communities. He was rumored to be notoriously difficult to get a meeting with, preferring to seek out projects rather than be approached. But Agnes, armed with her meticulous research and an unwavering belief in the Millbrook Tower's potential, knew she had to try. One Tuesday morning, after her shift, Agnes drove to Elias Vance's office, a sleek, glass-fronted building that stood in stark contrast to Millbrook's aging downtown. She wore her best navy blazer, the one that projected quiet authority. In her sensible handbag was the manila folder, brimming with her exhaustive research, property assessments, architectural drafts, market analyses, and her own detailed notes from her janitorial observations. She hadn't called for an appointment. She knew he wouldn't grant one to Agnes Miller, former principal, current janitor. Instead, she'd simply walked into his elegant reception area, a woman out of time, yet carrying an air of purpose that disarmed the polished young receptionist. "I'm Agnes Miller," she announced, her voice calm but firm. "I believe Mr. Vance will be very interested in what I have to show him regarding the Millbrook Tower." The receptionist, a woman named Chloe with a meticulously neat bun and an air of practiced politeness, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment, Mrs. Miller? Mr. Vance's schedule is incredibly tight." "No, I don't," Agnes replied, offering a small, disarming smile. "But I assure you this won't take much of his time, and it could be the most valuable conversation he has all week." She placed her manila folder, thick and unassuming, on the gleaming reception desk. The contrast between her simple folder and the high-tech, minimalist decor of the office was almost comical. Chloe hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to such directness from someone who wasn't escorted by security or a high-powered attorney. But there was something in Agnes's eyes, a quiet steel that compelled her. "I'll see if he's available, Mrs. Miller. It might be a while." Agnes settled into a plush leather chair, ignoring the curious glances of other, clearly important visitors. She pulled out a small book of poetry and began to read, projecting an aura of patience and unshakable resolve. An hour passed. Then another. Chloe occasionally glanced at her, her initial skepticism slowly morphing into a begrudging respect. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, Chloe's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Vance will see you now," Chloe announced, her voice holding a hint of surprise, as if even she hadn't expected it. But only for 10 minutes. Agnes simply nodded, tucked her book away, and walked down the long corridor to Elias Vance's office. It was a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city skyline. Elias Vance, a man in his late 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a carefully cultivated casual elegance, sat behind a massive mahogany desk. He gestured to the chair opposite him, his expression one of polite curiosity mixed with professional weariness. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice smooth and controlled. "Chloe tells me you have something important regarding the Millbrook Tower. I confess, I'm intrigued. Few people simply walk in off the street anymore, let alone with a project concerning that particular building. What's your background in commercial real estate?" Agnes placed her manila folder on his desk. "My background is in seeing potential where others see decay, Mr. Vance, and in understanding the minutiae that makes a whole. For 45 years, I managed Millbrook High. I balanced budgets, handled countless emergencies, and kept a complex institution running smoothly. What I learned is that the biggest problems often hide in plain sight, and the most valuable assets are frequently overlooked." She opened the folder, sliding her certifications across the polished wood. "I've also been studying property management, real estate investment, urban revitalization." Elias Vance's eyebrows rose as he examined the certificates, his professional mask slipping slightly to reveal genuine surprise. These are serious programs, Mrs. Miller. Not a typical retirement hobby, if you don't mind me saying." "I don't do anything halfway, Mr. Vance," Agnes said simply. "When I decide to learn something, I learn it properly." She then began to lay out her detailed analysis of the Millbrook Tower, the current owner's financial distress, the building's historical significance, its surprisingly robust structural integrity, despite its outward appearance, and her vision for its transformation. She spoke of the hidden revenue streams, the potential for mixed-use development, the unmet demand for vibrant downtown spaces in Millbrook. She presented her meticulously drawn floor plans, her calculations for renovation costs, and her conservative projections for future rental income. Elias listened, his initial polite skepticism gradually giving way to cautious interest, then genuine engagement. He leaned forward, occasionally interrupting with sharp, incisive questions about zoning, financing, or the local political landscape. Agnes answered each query with a precise, well-researched response, drawing on not only her academic studies, but also her intimate knowledge gained from months of sweeping, mopping, and observing. She told him about the ghost of a leaky pipe in the boiler room, which, if fixed, could save thousands in water bills, about the overlooked potential of the rooftop for a community garden or event space, about the perfectly sound foundation that made expansion a real possibility. "You've been inside the building extensively, it seems," Elias noted, a hint of amusement in his voice. "More than just studying blueprints." "I'm the janitor, Mr. Vance," Agnes stated, her eyes twinkling. "I know every dust bunny, every creek, every hidden corner. I've had months to walk through it, feel its pulse, understand its true potential. No architect's drawing, no investor's prospectus can give you that kind of intimate knowledge." Elias Vance sat back in his chair, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. "My clients usually talk about profit margins and market penetration. You're talking about proving a point. And you've got an extraordinary amount of data for someone who cleans toilets." "I'm talking about building something meaningful, Mr. Vance," Agnes said. "Something that will outlast me. But yes, I suppose I'm also proving a point. Several points, actually." She thought of Michael's dismissive laugh, Amanda's patronizing concern. That age and innovation aren't mutually exclusive. That a community can revitalize itself from within. And that sometimes, the most valuable insights come from the most unexpected places. "Can I ask you something, Mrs. Miller?" Elias asked, his gaze sharp. "Why me? There are established real estate firms, people with decades of experience in commercial acquisitions. Why come to a developer known for, well, for being selective? Agnes had anticipated this question, had spent sleepless nights considering her answer. Because you're known for seeing potential beyond the obvious, Mr. Vance. You've transformed buildings that others had written off. You left a larger, more corporate firm to start your own, which tells me you understand the value of taking risks for something you believe in. And because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, I think we both know what it's like to have people underestimate us. Elias's laugh was a genuine, booming sound. You did your homework, Mrs. Miller. I always do my homework, Agnes replied, gathering her papers, stacking them with the same precision she'd once used to organize lesson plans. It's what made me a good principal, and it's what's going to make this building succeed. I'm not looking for someone to hold my hand or talk me out of my foolish dreams. I'm looking for a partner who can help me turn those dreams into reality. A partner? Elias's voice carried a note of surprise. 20% equity stake in exchange for your expertise and full commitment to the project, Agnes said, the offer she'd rehearsed a dozen times coming out smooth and confident. I provide the vision, the initial funding, and the intimate knowledge of the asset. You provide the development expertise, the network, and the financing connections. We build something neither of us could create alone. Elias was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his desk. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. My last big project, I spent 2 years developing a revolutionary mixed-use concept that could have transformed an entire urban block. Management shelved it because they said it was, quote, too innovative for their investor base. Their loss. Precisely, Agnes said simply. I've been struggling to find someone who wants true innovation, rather than minor tweaks to existing formulas. Most developers talk big about revitalizing downtowns, but when it comes time to actually invest in new concepts, they want safe, proven methods. I don't want safe, Agnes said. I want revolutionary. I want people to drive past the Millbrook Tower and stop in their tracks because they've never seen anything like it. I want to prove that age and innovation aren't mutually exclusive. And I want to do it in a way that creates jobs, revitalizes this community, and shows what's possible when you stop letting other people's limitations become your own. Elias studied Agnes's face, searching for something, doubt, maybe, or the kind of naive optimism that crumbled under pressure. Whatever he was looking for, he apparently didn't find it. When do we start, Mrs. Miller? Agnes felt her heart skip a beat. You mean, I've spent the last year trying to convince venture capitalists and institutional investors to take a chance on real innovation. Maybe it's time I took a chance on someone who's not afraid to dream big. Elias extended his hand across the table. Partners? Agnes's handshake was firm, decisive, the grip of someone sealing a deal she'd already won in her mind. Partners. But first, I want you to see the building. Not just the blueprints, but the raw space. I want you to stand in that dusty lobby and tell me what you see. Now, if you're free, Millbrook's only 20 minutes from here, and I find that big dreams require immediate action. Elias laughed, a sound of genuine delight. You know what? I like your style, Mrs. Miller. Agnes, she corrected, we're partners now, and partners don't stand on ceremony. As they gathered their things and headed for the door, Agnes felt something she hadn't experienced since Harold's death. The electric thrill of possibility. The sense that her life was expanding, rather than contracting. Her children had dismissed her dreams as fantasy, but Elias Vance saw them as opportunity. The drive to Millbrook would be the first of many journeys they'd take together. But as Agnes unlocked her car and watched Elias climb into his own sleek vehicle, she knew this partnership was more than just a business arrangement. It was validation that innovation, ambition, and the courage to dream didn't diminish with age. They just needed the right person to recognize their value. The Millbrook Tower waited for them like a blank canvas, ready to be transformed by two people who refused to let other people's expectations define what was possible. The news of Agnes Miller, the former high school principal, forming a partnership with a prominent city developer to acquire and renovate the Millbrook Tower spread like wildfire through the town. It ignited a spectrum of reactions, from genuine excitement among younger residents and struggling small business owners to a simmering resentment among the old guard. At the forefront of this opposition stood Cyrus Blackwood, a man who represented the entrenched power of Millbrook's established elite. Cyrus, a 72-year-old patriarch of the Blackwood real estate empire, had built his fortune on steady, predictable investments. Strip malls on the highway, a few rental properties, and the vast tracts of farmland he'd purchased over decades. He was a pillar of the community, a fixture at town council meetings, and a man who believed that Millbrook's future lay in maintaining its traditions, not in radical outsider development. The Millbrook Tower, in his eyes, was a lost cause, an eyesore to be ignored, certainly not a project to be embraced by a retired schoolteacher who suddenly thought she was a real estate mogul. The first overt sign of opposition came not in a public forum, but through a series of subtle yet unmistakable hurdles. Elias Vance, with his connections, had begun the due diligence process, reaching out to local officials for permits, zoning information, and historical records. Each step was met with unexpected delays, requests for additional documentation, and a general air of bureaucratic foot-dragging that went beyond typical small-town inefficiency. "It's like wading through molasses, Agnes," Elias grumbled over a conference call one afternoon, his voice strained with frustration. "Every department seems to have a new, special requirement for the Millbrook Tower project. The Historical Society just declared a rare species of fern might be growing in the back alley, demanding a 2-month environmental impact study before we can even begin exterior cleanup. A fern, Agnes? In a concrete alley." Agnes listened calmly from her home office, now a dedicated space filled with blueprints and legal pads. "That sounds like Cyrus Blackwood, Elias. He chairs the Historical Preservation Committee, and his nephew is on the zoning board. He prides himself on, quote, protecting Millbrook's heritage from anything new or disruptive." "Disruptive?" Elias scoffed. "We're trying to revitalize a dying downtown. This building is an empty shell. What exactly is he protecting? The dust bunnies." "He's protecting his version of Millbrook," Agnes replied, her voice firm, "and his influence. He sees new development, especially something as ambitious as ours, as a challenge to his authority. He's a man who understands power, and he wields it through careful, quiet pressure." Agnes knew Cyrus well. He was a man who preferred to operate in the shadows, pulling strings, whispering in ears, rather than engaging in direct confrontation. His methods were subtle but effective, designed to exhaust and demoralize opponents until they simply gave up. He was a master of bureaucratic warfare. The pressure intensified. Local banks that had initially shown interest in financing the renovation suddenly became hesitant, citing, quote, unforeseen market uncertainties. Contractors who had eagerly submitted bids for the project mysteriously became unavailable, their schedules suddenly packed. Even the small, independent title company Elias had chosen found itself buried under an avalanche of, quote, complex historical deed inquiries that ground the acquisition process to a crawl. "This is more than just bureaucracy, Agnes," Elias declared during another exasperated phone call. "Someone is actively trying to kill this project. They're making calls, leaning on people. It smells like a concerted effort." "It is," Agnes confirmed, her eyes narrowed. "Cyrus won't attack directly. That's not his style. He'll apply pressure points, make things so difficult and expensive that we walk away. He's counting on us losing patience or running out of capital." "Well, he certainly knows how to play the long game," Elias admitted, a grudging respect in his tone. "Every delay costs us. Time is money, and we're bleeding both." Agnes, however, was prepared for a long game. Decades of school administration had taught her the art of patience, the importance of meticulous documentation, and the resilience required to navigate endless layers of red tape. She spent her days not just reviewing Elias's updates, but proactively investigating, making her own quiet inquiries, using her own network within the community. She called retired colleagues, former students now in various city departments, even old acquaintances from church. She pieced together the whispers, the unspoken allegiances, the subtle threads of influence that Cyrus Blackwood had woven throughout Millbrook. Her children, Michael and Amanda, oblivious to the battle Agnes was waging, continued with their own lives, occasionally calling to check in on their mother's hobby project. Michael would ask, with a thinly veiled condescension, if she'd finally, quote, gotten those permits cleared. Amanda would hint, during their brief phone calls, about the, quote, risks of overextending oneself and the importance of knowing when to cut your losses. Agnes would simply smile, offer a non-committal answer, and return to her work, leaving them in their comfortable ignorance. One evening, Agnes attended a seemingly innocuous town hall meeting about local traffic patterns. Cyrus Blackwood was there, seated prominently in the front row, occasionally offering a grave nod or a concerned murmur. After the meeting, as people mingled, Agnes approached him. "Good evening, Cyrus," Agnes said, her voice warm and pleasant, as if they were discussing the weather. "It's been a while. How's Mildred?" Cyrus, a man with a carefully sculpted facade of southern gentility, turned, his eyes flicking over Agnes with a practiced neutrality. "Agnes, good evening. Mildred's well, thank you. And yourself? Still, busy with your new interests?" His tone held a subtle but unmistakable patronizing edge. "Very busy," Agnes confirmed, refusing to be drawn into his subtle provocations. "The Millbrook Tower project is moving along, slowly but surely. Though we've hit a few unexpected snags with the permitting process. It's almost as if someone is deliberately making things difficult." She met his gaze directly, a faint smile on her lips. Cyrus's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, recognition perhaps, or a hint of annoyance, passed through his eyes. "Well, Agnes, these things are complex, you know. Regulations, historical protections. It's all there for a reason, to protect our community from ill-conceived ventures." "Indeed," Agnes agreed, her voice still pleasant. "And I'm sure everyone involved is simply doing their due diligence. But I've always found that clear communication and a shared vision can often cut through red tape much faster than, say, anonymous phone calls to zoning officials or quiet conversations with bank managers." Cyrus's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He finally dropped the facade of polite indifference. "Agnes, this isn't some high school bake sale. This is commercial real estate, big money. And frankly, this town has always done things a certain way. Outsiders and even well-meaning amateurs sometimes don't understand the lay of the land." "I understand the lay of the land perfectly, Cyrus," Agnes countered, her voice now firm, stripping away the pleasantry. "I've lived here for 50 years. I raised my children here. I know every crack in the pavement, every hidden alley, and I know that Millbrook is ready for more than just stagnation. The Millbrook Tower isn't just an old building to me, Cyrus. It's a symbol. And I intend to make it a symbol of revitalization, not decay. And I will not be deterred by snags or complexities, or subtle pressures. I've faced down far more formidable teenagers than any bureaucrat you can put in my way." Cyrus stared at her, his calculated composure visibly shaken. He probably hadn't had anyone speak to him with such directness and such quiet authority in decades. He had expected her to be naive, easily frustrated, perhaps even intimidated. He hadn't expected the steel beneath the gentle exterior. "We'll see, Agnes," Cyrus said, his voice lower, harder. "We'll see how long your enthusiasm lasts when the real challenges begin." He turned abruptly and walked away, his departure almost an escape. Agnes watched him go, a sense of grim satisfaction settling in her. The battle lines were drawn. Cyrus Blackwood had revealed his hand, even if subtly. But he had also underestimated her. He saw an old woman playing at a man's game. Agnes saw a chess match, and she had just moved her queen. The delays, the whispered concerns, the subtle pressures, she would navigate them all. She had faced down difficult parents, stubborn school board members, and recalcitrant teenagers for 45 years. Cyrus Blackwood, with all his money and influence, was just another challenge to be met with patience, persistence, and an unwavering belief in her vision. The Millbrook Tower would not be defeated by whispers. It would rise. As Agnes waged her quiet war against Cyrus Blackwood's subtle machinations, an entirely different kind of battle was unfolding, unseen by her, in the distant lives of her children. Michael and Amanda, so quick to dismiss their mother's fantasy, were about to discover the fragility of their own carefully constructed worlds. The foundations they had built their lives upon, career success, financial stability, polished appearances, were beginning to crumble. Michael Miller, the regional sales manager for Hartwell and Associates Agricultural Equipment, received the letter on a Tuesday morning. Crisp, official, bearing the impersonal letterhead of a corporation he'd dedicated 22 years of his life to. He stared at it for a full minute before his trembling fingers managed to tear open the envelope. 2 paragraphs of corporate speak about restructuring, market optimization, and difficult decisions, effective immediately. Severance package. Best wishes for future endeavors. He sat in his empty cubicle. They'd given him 15 minutes to clear out his desk, and felt the walls of his carefully constructed life collapsing around him. The twins' college tuition bills sat unpaid on his kitchen counter. The mortgage on his suburban Atlanta house had already been refinanced twice, the interest rates climbing like a fever. His divorce settlement required monthly payments that assumed a 6-figure salary he no longer had. At 48, Michael Miller was officially obsolete. The irony wasn't lost on him. For weeks, he'd been telling his 65-year-old mother that she was too old to start over, that business was too risky for someone her age, that she should accept her limitations and settle into quiet retirement. Now he sat in his car in a corporate parking lot, his own career in ruins, facing the terrifying prospect of starting over himself. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife. "Tuition payment is late again. The girls are asking questions." Michael closed his eyes and tried to remember when everything had started falling apart. Was it when Jennifer filed for divorce 2 years ago, citing his obsession with work and emotional unavailability? Was it when he'd stopped believing in the agricultural equipment he was selling, watching small farmers go under while corporate operations swallowed their land? Or was it earlier, when he'd looked at his vibrant, accomplished mother and seen only an aging woman whose dreams were inconvenient embarrassments? 2 hours later, he stood in Amanda's gleaming Atlanta law office, watching his sister pace behind her mahogany desk like a caged predator. Even in crisis, Amanda projected the polished competence that had made her a partner at one of the city's most prestigious firms. Her hair was perfect, her suit immaculate, her expression carefully controlled. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Amanda said, her voice tight with barely contained frustration. "Mom's lost her mind, and now you've lost your job. I'm the only one left holding this family together." Michael wanted to point out that Amanda's own marriage had collapsed 6 months ago, that her custody battle with her investment banker ex-husband was splashed across the society pages, that her holding the family together mostly consisted of writing checks and avoiding uncomfortable conversations. But he needed her help too much to pick a fight. "The severance will last 3 months, he said instead. "Maybe 4 if I'm careful. But after that, you'll have to ask Mom for help," Amanda finished, her tone making it clear how she felt about that prospect. "The same woman who's throwing away her life savings on some real estate fantasy? Do you see how insane this has become?" She turned to face the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of downtown Atlanta. Even from the 40th floor, Amanda felt exposed, vulnerable in ways she'd never experienced. Her separation from David had been messy and public, her professional reputation suffering from the whispered speculation about their failed marriage. The last thing she needed was her mother making headlines as the eccentric old lady who tried to become a real estate developer. "I talked to the partners yesterday," Amanda continued, her voice carefully neutral, "about the Peterson merger. Apparently the clients have concerns about my stability, my ability to maintain focus during personal difficulties." Michael understood the subtext. In Amanda's world, image was everything. Professional success depended on projecting competence, reliability, and unshakable confidence. Having a mother who was making what looked like irrational business decisions reflected poorly on Amanda's judgment and family stability. "So we stop her," Michael said, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "We talk to the bank, maybe challenge her mental competency." "You want to have our mother declared incompetent?" Amanda spun around, her composure cracking slightly. "Michael, she's not senile. She's not confused. She's just stubborn, and apparently, she's been planning this for years." They'd both underestimated their mother, Michael realized. The detailed research, the financial planning, the careful preparation, none of it suggested someone making impulsive decisions. It suggested someone who'd been thinking and planning while they'd been dismissing her as a harmless old lady. "Then what do you suggest?" he asked. "I don't know," Amanda admitted, and the uncertainty in her voice was more frightening than her anger. Amanda always had a plan, always knew the right legal strategy or negotiation tactic. Hearing her admit confusion felt like watching the last stable foundation crumble. They sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own financial and emotional calculations. Outside, Atlanta pulsed with ambition and energy, the kind of dynamic urban environment that had drawn them both away from rural Georgia decades ago. Now, that sophisticated world felt less like an achievement and more like a trap. "Maybe we should go see her," Michael said finally. "Talk to her again, explain the situation." "You mean explain that her successful children are both disasters who need her help?" Amanda's laugh was bitter. "The same woman we told she was too old and confused to make her own decisions? I'm sure that conversation will go well." But they both knew they didn't have a choice. Pride was a luxury neither of them could afford anymore. The drive to Millbrook took 2 hours. Time enough for Michael to rehearse apologies he wasn't sure he meant, and for Amanda to practice swallowing the pride that had sustained her through law school, partnership track, and every professional challenge she'd faced. The irony of their situation wasn't lost on either of them. They were going home to ask for help from the woman they'd tried to pack off to assisted living just weeks earlier. Agnes's house looked smaller than they remembered, more modest, and somehow more substantial at the same time. The garden showed signs of recent attention, and construction equipment was visible in the distance where the old Millbrook Tower was slowly being transformed. Their mother's dream was taking physical form while their own lives fell apart. Wichazi, Agnes answered the door with a satisfied expression that faded when she saw their faces. She'd been expecting this visit, Michael realized. Probably had been since the day they'd dismissed her plans as unrealistic fantasy. "Well," she said, stepping aside to let them in, "this is a surprise." The living room felt different somehow, less like a shrine to the past, and more like the headquarters of someone planning for the future. Property development journals were stacked on the coffee table, and a laptop computer. When had their mother gotten a laptop? Sat open with what looked like architectural plans displayed on the screen. "Mom," Michael began, then stopped. "How do you tell your mother that everything you'd said about responsibility and realistic expectations had been wrong? How do you admit that the child was coming to the parent for rescue?" "You lost your job," Agnes said simply. Michael nodded, surprised by her directness. 3 weeks ago. Downsizing. 22 years, and they gave me 15 minutes to clean out my desk. "And your custody hearing is next month," she continued, looking at Amanda. "David's using your travel schedule and work hours against you, claiming you're an absent mother." Amanda's composure cracked. "How did you?" "I read the newspaper," Agnes said dryly. "Society page might not be hard news, but it covers the important divorces. Plus, Washington's daughter works at the courthouse. Small towns have their advantages." The casual way she'd been monitoring their lives while they'd been dismissing hers felt like another small betrayal. She'd known about their struggles, their failures, their growing desperation, and she'd said nothing during their lecture about her unrealistic dreams. "I suppose you think this proves your point," Amanda said, her lawyer's instincts kicking in even in defeat. "That we're hypocrites for questioning your judgment." "I think it proves that life is unpredictable," Agnes replied, "that success can disappear overnight, that the things we think make us secure can vanish without warning. It's why I decided to stop waiting for permission to live my life." She moved to the window, looking out toward the construction site that represented her future. "It also proves that my children are human beings with problems and challenges, just like everyone else. That doesn't make you hypocrites. It makes you my children." The gentleness in her voice was harder to bear than anger would have been. Michael felt tears threatening, the kind of emotional breakdown he hadn't experienced since his divorce was finalized. "I need help, Mom," he said quietly. "The severance won't last long, and I've got payments, obligations." "I know," she said, "and I need someone. The girls can stay with this summer. Amanda added, her professional mask finally slipping entirely. David's threatening to use any childcare arrangements against me. Claims I'm pawning them off on strangers instead of being a real mother. I know that too. They sat in silence. 3 generations of pride and disappointment and love tangled up in the modest living room where they'd celebrated birthdays and Christmas mornings and high school graduations. The distance between them felt both vast and fragile, like something that could be bridged with the right words or destroyed completely with the wrong ones. I have a proposition, Agnes said finally. Michael, I need someone to handle the business development side of this operation. Tenant relations, marketing, securing new businesses. Someone who understands sales, but also understands community building. The pay wouldn't be what you're used to, but it would be steady, and there's potential for significant growth if the business succeeds. Michael stared at her, processing the offer. Working for his mother. The woman he'd told was too old to understand modern business. The irony was almost too perfect. And Amanda, Agnes continued, I need legal counsel. Someone who understands corporate structure, contract law, regulatory compliance for a large-scale renovation. I can't afford your hourly rate, but I could offer equity in the company, plus the girls would love spending summer here. Dot's granddaughter is their age, and this place could use some young energy. Amanda's laugh was slightly hysterical. You're offering us jobs? After we told you this whole thing was insane? I'm offering you a chance to be part of something, Agnes corrected. Something that might succeed, or might fail, but either way it's ours. A family business, 3 generations working together instead of apart. The offer hung between them like a lifeline thrown across turbulent water. Michael thought about his empty suburban house, the mounting bills, the humiliation of unemployment at 48. Amanda thought about her daughters asking why Daddy didn't live with them anymore, about partnership meetings where her colleagues whispered about her personal instability. Why? Michael asked after everything they'd said. Because you're my children, Agnes said simply. Because I love you, even when you're being idiots. And because this project is too big for one person, even one very determined 65-year-old person. She turned back to them, her expression serious. But I need to be clear about something. This is my company, my vision, my risk. If you come work for me, you work for me. No more lectures about what's realistic for someone my age. No more suggestions about assisted living. No more treating me like I'm too old to know my own mind. The conditions were fair, Michael realized, more than fair considering their alternatives. But accepting meant admitting they'd been wrong about everything. Their mother's capabilities, their own security, the assumption that age automatically meant decline. I'll think about it, Amanda said finally. Me too, Michael added. But they both knew they'd already decided. Pride was expensive, and neither of them could afford it anymore. Sometimes, the child had to become the employee, the critic had to become the supporter, the one who dismissed dreams had to learn to believe in them. Outside, the sun was setting over Millbrook, casting long shadows across the abandoned Millbrook Tower that was slowly transforming into something unprecedented. In a few weeks it would be full of new businesses and innovative concepts, a testament to the power of dreams. Pursued regardless of age or expectations, and if things worked out, it would also be full of family. 3 generations of Millers learning to work together, to support each other's dreams instead of dismissing them. To understand that starting over wasn't a sign of failure but a mark of courage. The fractures were deep, but they weren't irreparable. The weeks that followed were a crucible for Michael and Amanda. Their initial thinking about it quickly devolved into a grim acknowledgement of their rapidly deteriorating circumstances. Michael's severance package dwindled, each bill a stark reminder of his fallen status. His phone, once buzzing with sales calls, now rang with automated reminders for overdue payments. The humiliation of unemployment, coupled with the gnawing anxiety of his financial obligations, began to chip away at his once unshakable confidence. He found himself avoiding old colleagues, ashamed to admit the truth of his situation. His suburban Atlanta house, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping him in a life he could no longer afford. The twins, home from college for the summer, inadvertently added to his stress, their youthful exuberance clashing with his quiet desperation. They saw him, not as the formidable sales manager he once was, but as a man increasingly withdrawn, haunted by unspoken worries. Amanda's life, meanwhile, had become a public spectacle. David, her ex-husband, a man known for his ruthlessness in the investment banking world, was leveraging every possible advantage in their custody battle. He used her grueling work hours, her demanding travel schedule, and now the whispers of her personal difficulties at the firm to paint her as an unfit absentee mother. The Peterson merger, once her crowning achievement, was reassigned to a younger, less, quote, complicated partner. Amanda's meticulously cultivated professional image, the very bedrock of her identity, cracked under the strain. She saw her colleagues, once her allies, now whispering behind cupped hands. The once impenetrable walls of her Atlanta law office felt flimsy, exposed. She'd always believed in her ability to control narratives, to strategize her way out of any bind. But this was different. This was personal, public, and relentlessly painful. Her daughters, Emma and Jake, were caught in the crossfire, their confusion mirroring her own. Their innocence highlighted the wreckage of her marriage, the sacrifices she'd made for a career that now seemed hollow. One evening, after another brutal phone call with David's lawyer, Amanda found herself staring at the Millbrook Towers website on her laptop. Elias Vance's development firm had launched a sleek, modern site showcasing the revitalization project. The renderings of the transformed building glowed with vibrant life, bustling retail spaces on the ground floor, light-filled co-working offices, artist studios, and even proposed residential units higher up. There was a section dedicated to community impact, detailing job creation, local business partnerships, and urban renewal. And prominently featured was a photo of Agnes, standing confidently beside Elias Vance, both smiling, projecting an aura of quiet competence and visionary leadership. The woman she'd dismissed as an eccentric old lady was building something tangible, something meaningful, while Amanda's own life crumbled. A wave of nausea washed over her, a bitter cocktail of regret, shame, and a terrifying realization. Her mother, the woman she'd tried to put in assisted living, was not only surviving but thriving. And Amanda, the high-powered attorney, was adrift. She called Michael. His voice, when he answered, was tired, almost defeated. "What is it, Amanda? More bad news?" I think we need to go see Mom," she said, the words catching in her throat. "Like, really see her. I can't do this anymore, Michael. The girls, David, everything. I'm drowning." A long silence stretched between them, punctuated by the faint sounds of Michael's children laughing in the background. "Yeah," he finally said, his voice raw. "Me too. I don't know what else to do." The drive to Millbrook was filled with an oppressive quiet, each mile bringing them closer to the difficult conversation they had both meticulously avoided. Michael stared out the window, the familiar rural landscape blurring past. He recalled the countless times he'd lectured Agnes about realism, about practicality. Now those words tasted like ash. Amanda clutched her briefcase on her lap, its contents, her divorce papers, her termination notice from the Peterson merger, a stark counterpoint to the vibrant transformation she'd seen on Agnes's website. The irony was a suffocating weight. They, the successful independent children, were coming, hat in hand, to the mother they deemed unfit to make her own decisions. Agnes's house appeared small, almost humble, nestled amidst a riot of colorful hydrangeas. But as they pulled into the driveway, they could see the construction cranes rising in the distance, silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. The Millbrook Tower, Agnes's dream, taking undeniable physical form. Agnes answered the door, her hands covered in garden soil, a satisfied expression on her face. Her smile, however, faded slowly when she saw their drawn faces. She'd been expecting this visit, Michael realized, probably had been since that disastrous Sunday dinner months ago. Her eyes held no judgment, only a deep, knowing calm. "Well," she said, stepping aside to let them in, "this is a surprise." The living room felt different from their last visit. It buzzed with a quiet energy, less a sanctuary of the past and more the command center of someone actively shaping the future. Architectural blueprints unfurled across the dining room table. Construction schedules were tacked to a corkboard, and Agnes's laptop, open on a detailed financial projection, hummed softly on a side table. "Mom," Michael began, then faltered. The words of apology, of confession, of desperation seemed to catch in his throat. How do you tell the woman you'd tried to relegate to assisted living that you needed her to save you? How do you admit that every piece of unsolicited advice you'd given her had been wrong, and every judgment you'd passed on her ambition had been a projection of your own fears? Agnes simply looked at him, her gaze piercing yet empathetic. "You lost your job, Michael," she stated, her voice devoid of triumph. Michael flinched, surprised by her directness. 3 weeks ago, downsizing, 22 years, and they gave you 15 minutes to clean out your desk. He could only nod, the humiliation burning in his cheeks. "And your custody hearing is next month," she continued, turning to Amanda. "David's using your travel schedule and work hours against you, claiming you're an absent mother. I saw the news about the Peterson merger being reassigned, and the whispers about your stability at the firm." Amanda's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped. "How did you know all this?" Her voice was a fragile whisper. "I read the newspaper, dear," Agnes said dryly, a faint, wry smile touching her lips. "The society page might not be hard news, but it covers the important divorces. Plus, Washington's daughter works at the courthouse. Small towns have their advantages, especially when you know how to listen." The casual way she'd been monitoring their struggles, their public failures, their growing desperation, while they'd been blithely dismissing her unrealistic dreams, felt like another small, humbling betrayal. She'd known about their impending collapse all along, and she had said nothing. "I suppose you think this proves your point," Amanda said, her lawyer's instincts kicking in even in defeat, "that we're hypocrites for questioning your judgment." "I think it proves that life is unpredictable," Agnes replied, her voice soft but firm, "that success can disappear overnight, that the things we think make us secure can vanish without warning. It's why I decided to stop waiting for permission to live my life." She moved to the window, looking out toward the construction site. "It also proves that my children are human beings with problems and challenges, just like everyone else. That doesn't make you hypocrites, it makes you my children." The gentleness in her voice was harder to bear than any anger would have been. Michael felt a burning behind his eyes, a desperate urge to break down, to confess everything. It was the kind of raw, emotional pain he hadn't experienced since his divorce was finalized. "I need help, Mom," he said quietly, the words stripped of all pride or pretense. "The severance won't last long, and I've got payments, obligations. I don't know what to do." "I know," she said, "and I need someone." "The girls can stay with you this summer," Amanda blurted out, her professional mask finally slipping entirely. Her voice trembled. "David's threatening to use any childcare arrangements against me, claims I'm pawning them off on strangers instead of being a real mother. I need a safe place for them. And for myself, I guess." "I know that too," Agnes said, her gaze steady. They sat in silence for a long moment, the three of them, 3 generations of pride and disappointment and undeniable love, tangled up in the modest living room where they'd celebrated countless birthdays and Christmas mornings and high school graduations. The distance between them felt both vast and fragile, like something that could be bridged with the right words, or destroyed completely with the wrong ones. The air was thick with unspoken apologies, with the weight of past judgments and the terrifying uncertainty of the future. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I have a proposition," Agnes said finally, her voice cutting through the tension with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. "Michael, I need someone to handle the business development side of this operation. Tenant relations, marketing, securing new businesses. Someone who understands sales but also understands community building. The pay wouldn't be what you're used to, not at first, but it would be steady, and there's significant potential for growth if the business succeeds." Michael stared at her, processing the offer. Working for his mother. The woman he'd told was too old to understand modern business. The irony was almost too perfect, almost painful in its poetic justice. And Amanda, Agnes continued, turning her gaze to her daughter. I need legal counsel. Someone who understands corporate structure, contract law, regulatory compliance for a large-scale renovation and ongoing operations. I can't afford your hourly rate, of course, but I could offer equity in the company, plus the girls would love spending summer here. Dot's granddaughter is their age, and this place could use some young energy. The Millbrook Elementary playground is just a few blocks away, and the library has a wonderful summer reading program. Amanda's laugh was a choked, slightly hysterical sound. You're offering us jobs? After we told you this whole thing was insane? After we tried to put you in a home? I'm offering you a chance to be part of something, Agnes corrected, her voice gentle but firm. Something that might succeed, or might fail, but either way, it's ours. A family business. 3 generations working together instead of apart. A chance to build something tangible, not just billable hours or sales quotas. The offer hung between them like a lifeline thrown across turbulent water. Michael thought about his empty suburban house, the mounting bills, the suffocating humiliation of unemployment at 48. He thought about his twin daughters, whose college dreams now seemed precarious. Amanda thought about her daughters, asking why Daddy didn't live with them anymore, about the cold corporate conference rooms where her colleagues whispered about her personal instability. She thought about the endless, exhausting legal battles she was facing. Why? Michael asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Why? After everything we said? After how we treated you? Because you're my children, Agnes said simply, her eyes softening, filled with a deep, unwavering love. Because I love you, even when you're being idiots. And because this project, West Try Love You, this building, this dream, it's too big for one person, even one very determined 65-year-old person. I need your skills, your experience. I need my family. She turned back to them, her expression serious, but with a hint of warmth. But I need to be clear about something. This is my company, my vision, my risk. If you come work for me, you work for me. No more lectures about what's realistic for someone my age. No more suggestions about assisted living. No more treating me like I'm too old to know my own mind. My rules. The conditions were fair, Michael realized, more than fair considering their alternatives. But accepting meant admitting they'd been wrong about everything. Their mother's capabilities, their own perceived security, the insidious assumption that age automatically meant decline. It meant swallowing a pride that had defined their adult lives. I'll think about it, Amanda said finally, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. Me too, Michael added, his gaze dropping to his hands. But they both knew they'd already decided. Pride was an expensive luxury, and neither of them could afford it anymore. Sometimes, the child had to become the employee, the critic had to become the supporter. The one who dismissed dreams had to learn to believe in them. Outside, the sun was setting over Millbrook, casting long purple shadows across the Millbrook Tower that was slowly transforming from a forgotten relic into a beacon of revitalization. In a few weeks, it would be humming with the sounds of new life, new businesses, new possibilities, a testament to the power of dreams pursued regardless of age or expectations. And if things worked out, it would also be full of family, 3 generations of Millers learning to work together, to support each other's dreams instead of dismissing them, to understand that starting over wasn't a sign of failure but a mark of courage. The fractures were deep, yes, but Agnes knew, with a certainty born of experience, that they weren't irreparable. They just needed the right catalyst, and perhaps a common purpose. The following Monday morning, Michael and Amanda arrived at Agnes's house, their faces etched with a reluctant determination that spoke volumes. They didn't need to say yes. Their mere presence, suitcase in hand for Amanda and the girls, was enough. Agnes greeted them with a quiet, knowing smile, devoid of any, "I told you so." She simply ushered them in, offered them coffee, and then, without further preamble, led them out to her car. "We're going to the tower," she announced, her voice brisk and professional. "Elias and I have a morning meeting with the construction foreman. It's time you both started learning the ropes. The drive was subdued. Michael, usually so garrulous, was uncharacteristically quiet, his gaze fixed on the familiar Millbrook streets that now felt alien. Amanda, ever the picture of controlled composure, held her posture stiffly, her corporate world clashing with the small-town reality she was re-entering. When they pulled into the bustling construction site that was once the abandoned Millbrook Tower parking lot, their eyes widened. The building was a hive of activity. Cranes loomed overhead, workers in hard hats moved purposefully, and the air thrummed with the sounds of drilling, hammering, and shouting. The facade was being carefully restored, new. Windows gleamed where broken panes once stared vacantly, and a temporary banner proclaimed, "Millbrook Tower, reimagined, revitalized, reborn." Agnes led them directly to a trailer set up as a temporary site office. Elias Vance was there, poring over blueprints with a burly foreman. He looked up, offered Michael and Amanda a polite but brief nod, and returned to his discussion. Agnes, without a word, pulled up chairs for her children. "This is Elias Vance, our development partner," Agnes introduced, her tone indicating no room for pleasantries or further explanation. "And this is Michael Miller, our new business development manager, and Amanda Miller, our general counsel." The titles hung in the air, formal and somewhat surreal in the dusty construction trailer. "Welcome to the team," Elias said without looking up. "Agnes tells me you're both highly competent. Good, we need competence. And a thick skin. This project is moving fast, and there will be challenges. Michael, you'll work closely with me on tenant acquisition and marketing strategies. Amanda, you'll be reviewing all contracts, permits, and ensuring we're in full compliance with local regulations, which I might add are suddenly becoming much more creatively interpreted." He gave Agnes a significant look, a silent acknowledgement of Cyrus Blackwood's ongoing pressure. The meeting that followed was a dizzying immersion into Agnes's world. They listened as Agnes and Elias discussed zoning variances, subcontractor bids, and the critical path for the grand opening. Agnes spoke with a fluency and command that astonished her children. She questioned Elias on budgeting, offered astute observations about local business needs, and even pointed out a potential logistical bottleneck in the material delivery schedule that the foreman hadn't considered. This wasn't a hobby, this was a serious, large-scale operation, and their mother was unequivocally at the helm. After the meeting, Agnes took them on a tour of the building. She moved through the dusty, echoing spaces with the familiarity of an owner, not a janitor. She pointed out where the new lobby would feature a coffee shop and a community art gallery. She showed them the vast, empty floors that would become co-working spaces, buzzing with the energy of entrepreneurs. She described the artist studios with their natural light and the top-floor residential units with their panoramic views. She spoke of the Millbrook Tower not just as a building, but as a living entity, an anchor for the revitalization of downtown. Michael, initially overwhelmed, started to ask questions, his sales manager instincts kicking in. "Mom, have we considered offering flexible lease terms for startups? That could attract a younger demographic." "Already in the projections, Michael," Agnes replied calmly, gesturing to a section of her detailed business plan. "And Elias has a network of angel investors interested in supporting our incubators. We've also designed a tiered rental system to support a range of businesses." Amanda, ever the attorney, began to identify potential legal hurdles. "Are the existing easements documented for these new retail spaces? What about ADA compliance for the residential units?" "All being handled, Amanda," Agnes responded, handing her a folder thick with legal documents. "Your first task will be to review these permits and contracts. Elias's legal team has drafted them, but I want your eyes on every line. We can't afford any missteps, especially with Cyrus Blackwood scrutinizing our every move." The mention of Cyrus Blackwood brought a flicker of fear to Amanda's eyes, a rare crack in her composed facade. Michael felt a chill, too. This wasn't some abstract corporate rival. This was a powerful local figure, the kind of man their mother was now directly challenging. Agnes noticed their apprehension. "Don't worry," she said, her voice firm. We're prepared. Cyrus is predictable. He uses legal maneuvers, bureaucratic delays. He thrives on frustration. Your job, Amanda, will be to ensure our legal position is unimpeachable. And Michael, you'll be building relationships, making sure the community supports us, so Cyrus's whispers fall on deaf ears. As the day wore on, a new reality settled over Michael and Amanda. Their mother wasn't just offering them jobs. She was offering them a lifeline, a purpose, and a chance to rebuild their lives under her formidable, yet surprisingly gentle leadership. The pride they had once scoffed at was now their only option for survival. That evening, back at Agnes's house, a different kind of family dinner took place. Michael and Amanda sat at the dining room table, not as guests, but as employees. Agnes, their boss, laid out their initial tasks, their immediate goals, and the clear chain of command. Michael, your first priority is to conduct a comprehensive market analysis for local businesses. We need to know exactly what services Millbrook is lacking and what types of businesses would thrive here. I want a detailed report on my desk by Friday. Amanda, you'll start with a deep dive into all outstanding permits and regulatory documents. Identify any potential areas of weakness that Cyrus Blackwood might exploit. I need a summary of potential risks and mitigation strategies by end of day tomorrow. They listened, they took notes. There was no condescension, no arguments, no veiled suggestions of assisted living. This was a professional meeting, and Agnes was the CEO. They were no longer mom's children, but employees reporting to Mrs. Miller. As Agnes dismissed them for the evening, instructing them to get a good night's rest for an early start the next day, Michael and Amanda exchanged a look. It was a mixture of exhaustion, dawning realization, and perhaps a flicker of something akin to awe. Their mother, the woman they had patronized, now held their financial and professional fates in her hands. The hierarchy had been decisively, undeniably flipped. They were working for her, in the building she was about to own. The twist, they now understood, was more profound and more humbling than they could have ever imagined. The taste of humble pie, Michael realized, was surprisingly palatable when it came with a side of hope. With Michael and Amanda formally on board, the Millbrook Tower project roared to life with renewed vigor. The infusion of their professional expertise, combined with Elias Vance's development prowess and Agnes's unwavering vision, formed a formidable, albeit unconventional team. The dynamics within the family shifted dramatically. The initial sting of reporting to their mother, a woman they had once condescended to, slowly gave way to a grudging respect, then genuine admiration. They watched, fascinated, as Agnes navigated complex negotiations with the old guard property owners, smoothed ruffled feathers with reluctant city officials, and even charmingly disarmed Cyrus Blackwood's more overt attempts at sabotage. The physical transformation of the Millbrook Tower became a tangible symbol of Agnes's defiance. What had once been a dilapidated eyesore was now a bustling construction site. The boarded-up windows were replaced with gleaming, energy-efficient glass. The faded brick was cleaned and tuck-pointed, revealing its original grandeur. Inside, the echoing vastness was meticulously subdivided into functional, vibrant spaces. The lower floors, designed for retail, began to attract curious local businesses: a bespoke coffee shop, a small art supplies store, and a community bookstore that specialized in local authors. Agnes personally interviewed each prospective tenant, ensuring their vision aligned with her goal of creating a true community hub, not just another commercial space. Michael, leveraging his decades of sales experience, took to his new role with surprising fervor. Stripped of the corporate pretense and the pressure to sell agricultural equipment he no longer believed in, he rediscovered a passion for connecting people and building relationships. He walked the streets of Millbrook, talking to shop owners, artists, and young entrepreneurs, painting a vivid picture of the revitalized tower. He convinced a young, ambitious chef to open a farm-to-table restaurant on the ground floor, promising a unique atmosphere and a direct connection to local producers. He negotiated partnerships with the local Chamber of Commerce and the County Tourism Board, positioning the Millbrook Tower as a landmark destination. He found a new sense of purpose, far removed from the sterile world of corporate quotas. He wasn't just selling space. He was selling a vision of a thriving Millbrook, one conversation at a time. Amanda, immersed in the intricate legalities of large-scale development, found her sharp legal mind challenged in new and unexpected ways. The corporate mergers she used to handle felt abstract compared to the tangible impact of securing a crucial zoning variance or drafting an ironclad lease agreement for a small, family-owned bakery. She meticulously reviewed every contract, every permit application, every environmental report, often catching subtle loopholes or potential pitfalls that Elias's seasoned legal team had overlooked. Her work directly countered Cyrus Blackwood's silent war of attrition, frustrating his attempts to derail the project with bureaucratic hurdles. The pressure of her divorce and custody battle still weighed on her, but the demanding, fulfilling work at the tower provided a much-needed sanctuary. She realized that real impact, real security, wasn't just about winning cases in a courtroom. It was about building something that lasted, something that served a purpose beyond her own personal gain. She also discovered a newfound respect for her mother's meticulousness, understanding now that Agnes's principal skills were perfectly transferable to this new, complex venture. The Millbrook Tower project started generating buzz. Local newspapers ran features on the phoenix rising from the ashes of downtown, highlighting the audacious vision of Agnes Miller. Regional business magazines picked up the story, fascinated by the former principal who was now revitalizing an entire urban block. Elias Vance, initially a silent partner, found himself frequently interviewed, always crediting Agnes as the true mastermind. The project became a case study in community-led urban renewal, drawing attention from architects, urban planners, and even other small towns grappling with their own declining downtowns. The most profound shift, however, occurred within the Millbrook community itself. Initially, there had been skepticism, fueled by Cyrus Blackwood's subtle campaign. People whispered about Agnes getting in over her head, about outsiders taking over. But as the physical transformation became undeniable, as the staff-only entrance gave way to a grand, accessible lobby, as job opportunities opened up, and as local businesses signed leases, the murmurs began to change. The turning point came with the opening of The Hearth, the farm-to-table restaurant on the ground floor. Michael, with Agnes's guidance, had orchestrated a grand opening that invited the entire community. The menu featured ingredients sourced from local farms, celebrating Millbrook's agricultural heritage while embracing the new dynamism of the tower. People lined up for blocks, eager to see the interior of the transformed building and taste the promise of its rebirth. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The grand lobby, once dusty and desolate, now gleamed, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee from the new cafe and the vibrant colors of local art displayed in the gallery. Agnes stood near the entrance, greeting every guest, her navy blazer replaced by a stylish dress, but her smile just as warm and genuine. She saw familiar faces from church, former students, old neighbors, even some of the existing maintenance crew she'd once worked alongside. Frank, Gus, and Maria, now proudly wearing Millbrook Tower Facilities uniforms, greeted guests with newfound confidence, sharing stories of the building's journey. Pastor Bill Hayes, a longtime friend of Agnes, offered a heartfelt blessing, speaking of resurrection and the power of faith in unlikely places. He specifically commended Agnes for her courage, for seeing not just what was, but what could be. "A year ago," Pastor Bill proclaimed, his voice echoing through the revitalized space, "some thought Mrs. Miller had lost her mind. We forgot that the same woman who managed our teenagers for 4 decades might know a thing or two about making impossible things happen." Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd, followed by a warm round of applause. Michael, observing from a distance, saw his mother not just as his boss but as a leader, a visionary. He watched as she effortlessly navigated conversations with curious investors, enthusiastic tenants, and even a few skeptical local officials who had previously dismissed her. Amanda, standing nearby, felt a lump form in her throat as she saw her mother, radiant and fulfilled, embracing a purpose that extended far beyond herself. Her work felt validated, connected to something larger. The true moment of validation came from an unexpected source. As Agnes moved through the crowd, she saw him, Cyrus Blackwood, standing in a corner, his arms crossed, a guarded expression on his face. He hadn't expected him to come. Their silent war had been relentless. Agnes approached him, a quiet challenge in her eyes. "Cyrus," she said, her voice calm. Thank you for coming. He looked around the bustling, vibrant space, then back at Agnes, his usual carefully cultivated composure showing a slight tremor. It's impressive, Agnes, he admitted, his voice grudging. More than I expected. More than you wanted to expect, perhaps, Agnes corrected gently. But this isn't just for me, Cyrus. It's for Millbrook. For its future. He gave a curt nod, then surprised her. I heard you had some trouble with the County Planning Commission on that last permit. My nephew, Robert, he mentioned some peculiar interpretations of the zoning code. I might have a word with him. For the good of the community, of course. Agnes simply smiled. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement. It was a crack in Cyrus Blackwood's formidable armor. The Whisper campaign had failed. The bureaucratic delays had been overcome. The Millbrook Tower was not only standing, it was thriving. And Agnes Miller, the former janitor, was building her legacy, one revitalized brick at a time, proving that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the quietest acts of defiance. The community, once skeptical, now watched in awe as the once abandoned building, and the woman who dared to dream it, rose from the ashes. Despite the undeniable success of the Millbrook Tower's initial revitalization, Cyrus Blackwood's opposition simmered, occasionally flaring into open acts of resistance. His grudging acknowledgement at the hearth's opening was a temporary truce, not a surrender. As Agnes and Elias began to expand their vision, proposing a second phase of development for the higher, still empty floors, converting them into affordable residential units and more community-focused spaces, Cyrus launched his most direct assault yet. It began with a public smear campaign. Letters to the editor of the Millbrook Gazette, subtly implying that Agnes Miller, despite her good intentions, was overextending herself, creating unnecessary risk for the town. Whispers circulated at town council meetings about the burden the new development might place on Millbrook's aging infrastructure. Anonymous complaints were lodged with city inspectors about minor infractions at the tower, leading to frequent, disruptive visits. Cyrus, a master manipulator of public opinion, leveraged his long-standing influence to stir up fear and doubt, playing on the inherent conservatism of a small town wary of rapid change. He's escalating, Agnes, Elias stated during a tense strategy meeting in Agnes's new, tastefully renovated office on the tower's third floor. The once dusty janitor's closet had become the nerve center of her burgeoning empire. He's openly challenging the residential zoning variants we need for the upper floors. He's funding a local Preserve Millbrook grassroots group to fight us. This is no longer just a few snags. He wants to stop us dead. Agnes leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. I know. He sees our success not as an opportunity for Millbrook, but as a threat to his way of life, to his control. This isn't about property, Elias. It's about power. His main argument, Amanda interjected, poring over legal documents, is that increased residential density will strain Millbrook's schools, water supply, and emergency services. He's also claiming we're disrupting the, quote, historical character of downtown by bringing in, quote, city concepts like co-working spaces and mixed-income housing. And he's painting Michael and me as outsiders, despite our family history here, Michael added, frustration coloring his voice. He implies we're just doing Mom's bidding, and that she's been misled by city slickers. The irony was particularly sharp for Michael, who had once been the one doing the dismissing. Agnes listened to her children's frustrations, understanding their anger. But she also saw Cyrus's fear. He was a man who had always been the biggest fish in Millbrook's pond, and she, an unexpected, unassuming woman, was now challenging his perceived dominance. We need to confront him directly, Agnes declared, her voice firm. No more passive resistance. We'll hold a public town hall meeting, we'll invite everyone, and we will lay out our case directly, transparently, and with irrefutable facts. Elias was skeptical. A public meeting, Agnes? Those can get ugly. Cyrus will pack the room with his people. It'll turn into a shouting match, not a debate. Then we make sure our message cuts through the noise, Agnes insisted. We don't just present numbers, we present a vision. And we bring the community into it. We show them not just what we're building, but why it matters to their lives. The town hall meeting was set for a Friday evening in Millbrook's old community auditorium. Agnes knew it would be a showdown. She and her team worked tirelessly, preparing presentations, gathering testimonials, and rehearsing their arguments. Michael spearheaded a grassroots campaign of his own, mobilizing small business owners, young families struggling to find affordable housing, and artists craving studio space. Amanda meticulously prepared legal counter-arguments, ready to debunk any spurious claims Cyrus might make. Elias secured compelling architectural renderings of the completed phases, showcasing the tower's seamless integration into the downtown landscape. On the night of the meeting, the auditorium was packed. Cyrus Blackwood sat in the front row, surrounded by his loyal supporters. Older farmers, established businessmen, and long-time residents who valued tradition above all else. He looked confident, almost smug, clearly expecting to dominate the proceedings. Agnes began the presentation. She spoke not just as a developer, but as a longtime resident of Millbrook. She reminded them of the Millbrook Tower's past glory, its decades of decline, and the empty storefronts that dotted their once vibrant downtown. She spoke of how her janitor job had given her an intimate knowledge of the building, and how that knowledge had fueled her dream. Her voice was calm, persuasive, resonating with a sincerity that cut through the initial murmurs of dissent. Elias followed, presenting the financial projections, the job creation numbers, and the increased tax revenue the revitalized tower would bring to Millbrook. He countered Cyrus's claims about infrastructure strain with detailed plans for upgraded water systems and traffic management. Then Michael took the stage. He spoke passionately about the new businesses already thriving in the tower: the Hearth Restaurant, the Millbrook Bookshelf, the Community Art Gallery. He brought up young entrepreneurs, some of them his former students, who were finally able to open their dream businesses in their hometown. He spoke to the need for vibrant spaces that could keep Millbrook's youth from moving away. "This isn't about replacing our history," Michael declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "It's about building on it. It's about creating a future where Millbrook is still a place our children want to come home to." Amanda, sharp and precise, addressed the legal and zoning concerns, systematically dismantling Cyrus's arguments. She presented precedent cases, legal interpretations, and meticulously compiled data that showed the project was not only compliant, but would set a new standard for responsible development. But the most impactful moment came during the open Q&A session. A young mother, a former student of Agnes, stood up. "Mrs. Miller," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "my husband and I, we're both teachers. We grew up here. We want to stay in Millbrook, but we can't afford a decent home. The proposed units in the tower, they're exactly what young families like ours need. You gave us hope, Mrs. Miller. You taught us to dream big. Please, don't let them take that away." Another voice, an older man, a retired small business owner, spoke next. "I've seen Millbrook decline for 20 years. Mr. Blackwood talks about tradition, but tradition without progress is stagnation. This tower, it's breathed new life into our main street. People are coming downtown again. My old hardware store, it's seeing more traffic than it has in a decade because of the new businesses here. This isn't just a building, it's our future." The tide of public opinion visibly shifted. Cyrus Blackwood, who had expected a compliant audience, saw his carefully cultivated narrative unraveling before his eyes. When it was his turn to speak, his voice, usually booming with authority, was tinged with a defensive edge. He reiterated his concerns about, quote, unnecessary risks and outsider influences, but his words no longer resonated. The vibrant images of the tower, the passionate testimonies of local residents, and the undeniable facts presented by Agnes's team had chipped away at his foundation of fear. Agnes, calm and composed, offered him the final word. "Cyrus, I respect your concerns. You've always cared deeply for Millbrook. But fear isn't always wisdom. Progress, when done thoughtfully, honors tradition by ensuring there's a future for it. We're not here to erase the past. We're here to build upon it, together. There is room for all of us in Millbrook's future." Cyrus sat down, his face flushed, a look of defeat settling into his features. He knew he had lost this battle. The applause that followed Agnes's words was thunderous, a clear mandate from the community. The next day, the Millbrook Gazette ran a headline: Tower Project Approved, Community Rallies Behind Visionary Plan. Cyrus Blackwood's subtle war had come to an end. Agnes Miller, the former janitor, had not only acquired the building but had also won the hearts and minds of her town. The future of Millbrook Tower and Millbrook itself looked brighter than ever. The approval of the residential zoning variance marked a pivotal turning point for the Millbrook Tower. With Cyrus Blackwood's public opposition silenced, if not fully converted, the project accelerated. Elias Vance pulled in additional financing, his initial skepticism replaced by fervent excitement for what Agnes had set in motion. The construction hummed with an almost rhythmic purpose, as if the very building was eager to embrace its rebirth. The transformation was breathtaking. The lower floors, already vibrant with the coffee shop, bookstore, art gallery, and the Hearth restaurant, became a bustling nexus of community life. People from Millbrook and surrounding towns flocked to downtown, drawn by the unique offerings and the palpable energy of revitalization. The once deserted sidewalks now teemed with shoppers, diners, and families enjoying the new public plaza. Agnes had insisted on carving out of a neglected side lot. The residential units on the upper floors filled almost immediately upon completion. Young professionals, couples, and even a few retired residents, lured by the promise of modern living in a revitalized downtown, eagerly moved in. The Millbrook Tower wasn't just a building anymore. It was a vertical village, a testament to Agnes's vision of a holistic, interconnected urban space. Under Agnes's steady hand, Michael flourished in his role as business development manager. He was no longer just selling square footage. He was curating a community. He attracted a tech startup, a boutique fitness studio, and a nonprofit organization focused on local history, each adding to the tower's diverse ecosystem. His days were filled with meetings, not in sterile corporate boardrooms, but in the lively lobby of the tower, over coffee at the ground floor cafe, or during impromptu tours for prospective tenants. He thrived on the direct impact of his work, seeing empty spaces fill with vibrant businesses, witnessing jobs being created, and watching Millbrook's downtown hum with a life it hadn't known in decades. The humiliation of his past unemployment faded, replaced by a deep sense of accomplishment and genuine pride in the legacy his mother was building, a legacy he was now an integral part of. He held weekly meetings with the new tenants, fostering collaboration and ensuring their success, embodying the community-centric approach Agnes championed. He even started mentoring some of the younger entrepreneurs, offering advice not just on business, but on resilience, echoing lessons he'd learned, unexpectedly, from his mother. Amanda, as general counsel, became the unwavering legal bedrock of the burgeoning enterprise. Her sharp intellect and meticulous attention to detail were invaluable. She navigated complex landlord-tenant laws, drafted intricate commercial leases, and handled the inevitable legal challenges that arose from such a high-profile project, often preempting potential issues before they escalated. Her work on the Millbrook Tower project garnered her recognition not just locally, but within regional legal circles. She was invited to speak at industry conferences, a testament to her expertise in a niche that combined real estate law with urban revitalization. The chaos of her divorce and custody battle began to recede, as she found stability and purpose in her professional life. Her daughters, Emma and Jake, now spent their summers at Agnes's house, their laughter echoing through the tower's halls as they explored its various businesses and vibrant community spaces. They saw their mother not as the stressed, perpetually busy attorney of their past, but as a confident, purposeful woman who was helping to build something tangible and good. They saw their grandmother, Agnes, as a true superhero. The original janitorial staff, Frank, Gus, and Maria, became fixtures of the revitalized tower. Maria, with her kind eyes and gentle demeanor, became the tower's much-loved head of guest services, greeting visitors and tenants with warmth and efficiency. Frank, his gruff exterior softening with pride, oversaw the building's expanded maintenance team, ensuring its seamless operation. Gus, with a newfound enthusiasm, became the dedicated ambassador for the co-working spaces, helping new tenants settle in. They were no longer invisible figures. They were valued members of a thriving team, integral to the building's success. They reported to Agnes, the former janitor who was now their owner, and they did so with respect and loyalty. The Millbrook Tower became a beacon. Urban planners from other struggling towns visited, eager to learn from Agnes's model. Architectural magazines featured its transformation in stunning spreads. Agnes, once a quiet, unassuming principal, found herself a reluctant public figure, invited to speak at conventions, featured in national business publications, and even honored by the governor for her contributions to community revitalization. She was known as the Tower Whisperer, the woman who saw life where others saw decay. One sunny afternoon, a bus tour pulled up to the tower. Agnes watched from her office window as a group of tourists, cameras in hand, eagerly spilled out, eager to experience the famed revitalization project. She saw Michael leading a group of potential investors, his voice ringing with renewed passion. Amanda was deep in conversation with a city council member, her posture confident, her words precise. Frank and Maria greeted guests in the lobby, their smiles genuine. Then, she saw him, Cyrus Blackwood. He was not on the tour, but he was standing across the street, observing the bustling scene. His arms were no longer crossed in defiance. His expression was thoughtful, almost wistful. As he scanned the thriving businesses, the lively plaza, the satisfied faces of residents, Agnes saw a flicker of something she hadn't seen before. Not anger, but perhaps regret. He recognized the undeniable success, the tangible proof of her vision. He saw the community benefiting, jobs created, Millbrook's spirit reignited. He saw a legacy that rivaled, perhaps even surpassed, his own. Kira Perfree, he caught her eye through the window. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two figures from different eras, different worldviews. Then, Cyrus did something unexpected. He offered a slow, deliberate nod. It was a silent acknowledgement, a concession, perhaps even a gesture of respect. The Millbrook Tower had not only been transformed, it had transformed its toughest critic. Agnes Miller, the former janitor, now truly owned the entire building. And the very people who had laughed at her, who had dismissed her, now either worked for her or silently acknowledged her triumph. The empire had truly risen. The Millbrook Tower's success reverberated far beyond the town limits, catching the attention of regional and even national developers. Agnes, now affectionately known as the Tower Queen or Millbrook's Miracle, found herself fielding calls and invitations daily. Her vision, initially dismissed as a quaint, elderly hobby, was now recognized as a viable model for urban revitalization in struggling small towns across the country. One crisp autumn morning, Elias Vance arrived at Agnes's office, a thick binder under his arm, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Agnes," he began without preamble, "we have an opportunity, a big one. The Redding Group, a national development firm, wants to meet. They've been following the tower project closely. They're interested in a franchise model, taking your Millbrook Miracle and replicating it in other abandoned commercial spaces across the southeast." Agnes, ever pragmatic, raised an eyebrow. "A franchise model, Elias? That's a significant undertaking. It requires a different kind of infrastructure, a different kind of growth." "Precisely," Elias agreed. "But the potential is enormous. Think of the impact. Dozens of Millbrook towers, revitalizing forgotten downtowns, creating jobs, empowering communities. We could create a movement." Michael and Amanda, now deeply entrenched in the tower's daily operations, joined the conversation. Michael, in his role as business development manager, had already begun fielding inquiries from other towns, inspired by Millbrook's transformation. "Mom, the calls are constant," he explained. "Small towns with abandoned malls, empty department stores, defunct factories. They're looking for a blueprint, a success story they can emulate. Your story." Amanda, ever the cautious legal mind, was already sketching out potential legal structures. "A franchise model would require a robust legal framework, Agnes. Standardized contracts, intellectual property protection for your methodology, rigorous training programs, but it's certainly feasible. And it would provide incredible leverage for future investments. Agnes listened to them, her gaze sweeping from Elias to Michael to Amanda. It was a moment of profound satisfaction. These were her children, her former critics, now her trusted lieutenants, eagerly discussing the expansion of her dream. They had not just joined her company, they had embraced her vision, making it their own. The thought of them, both successful in their previous lives, now thriving under her leadership, filled her with a quiet pride that transcended any professional achievement. "What about succession planning?" Agnes asked, her voice calm. The question hung in the air, a natural progression of their discussion. She wasn't ready to retire, not by a long shot, but she was a planner. She had built something remarkable, and she intended for it to outlive her. Elias, Michael, and Amanda exchanged glances. This was a conversation they had subtly avoided, out of respect, or perhaps a lingering discomfort with the idea of their formidable mother stepping down. "Agnes," Elias began, "you're the heart of this. The vision. We haven't really—" "I'm not going anywhere, Elias," Agnes interrupted gently. "But Greenrise Development, as we'll call this new entity, needs a clear path forward. It's grown beyond what one person can manage alone. It needs strong, dedicated leadership for the next generation. For the next 20 years, she looked at Michael first. "Michael, you've shown a remarkable aptitude for community building and fostering relationships. You understand how to connect with people, how to sell a vision, not just a product. You've brought a human touch to the business development side that no corporate training could teach." Then she turned to Amanda. "Amanda, your legal acumen, your meticulous attention to detail, and your ability to foresee and mitigate risks are invaluable. You've proven you can protect this enterprise, guide it through complex regulatory landscapes, and ensure its integrity. You're also a mother, and you understand the importance of legacy." A comfortable silence settled in the room. They both knew where she was going. "I propose," Agnes said, her voice clear and strong, "that Elias remain as our primary development partner and lead on new acquisitions and architectural design. But for the day-to-day operations of Greenrise Development, for leading this expansion, for nurturing this movement we've started, I want you two to take the reins. Michael, as CEO, Amanda, as COO and General Counsel." Michael's jaw dropped. Amanda's eyes widened. They had come to her, broken and desperate, begging for jobs. Now she was offering them control of an entire burgeoning enterprise, a national model of revitalization. "Mom," Michael stammered, that's a huge responsibility, and you're ready for it," Agnes said simply. "You both are. You've learned from the ground up, literally, with me. You've seen the challenges, the triumphs. You've proven your commitment. And you understand the core values: community, sustainability, and defying expectations." Amanda, ever practical, recovered quickly. "What would your role be, Agnes?" Agnes smiled, a truly contented smile. "I'll be the founder, the visionary consultant. I'll advise, I'll guide, I'll cheerlead. I'll handle the occasional recalcitrant politician, perhaps. And I'll finally get to tend my hydrangeas properly, knowing that my dream is in capable hands. You will still report to me on major strategic decisions, of course, but the day-to-day operations and growth will be yours." She looked at them both, her gaze filled with a quiet pride. "You both laughed when I took a janitor job at 65. Now you'll own this entire building, and many more, leading a national movement. And you'll report to me, your mother, your founder. How's that for a twist?" Michael and Amanda looked at each other, then back at Agnes. There was a moment of shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the incredible journey they had all been on. The shame of their past dismissal had dissolved into a profound respect. "We'd be honored, Mom," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "More than honored," Amanda added, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "We'll make you proud." Agnes simply nodded. She knew they would. The empire had risen, and its future was secure, built not just on bricks and mortar, but on renewed purpose, unlikely partnerships, and the unwavering belief that it's never too late to start something new, no matter how audacious. Years later, the Millbrook Tower stood as a shining beacon of revitalization, its name now officially the Agnes Miller Tower, a testament to the woman who had dared to dream beyond convention. Greenrise Development, under the dynamic leadership of CEO Michael Miller and COO Amanda Miller, had expanded exponentially, replicating Agnes's model in dozens of neglected urban and rural centers across the country. Each Greenrise hub was a vibrant ecosystem of local businesses, co-working spaces, and affordable housing, breathing new life into forgotten communities. Agnes, now in her late 70s, was indeed the founder and visionary consultant. She kept a beautiful, light-filled office on the top floor of the Agnes Miller Tower, overlooking the bustling downtown of Millbrook. Her days were no longer filled with mops and buckets, but with strategic planning sessions, mentorship meetings with aspiring developers, and the occasional keynote address at national conferences. She still spent hours in her garden, her hydrangeas thriving, but her definition of retirement had profoundly changed. It wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning, a continuous expansion of purpose. Her relationship with Michael and Amanda had transformed. The condescension was gone, replaced by a deep mutual respect. They were still her children, but now they were also her protégés, her partners, carrying forward the legacy she had started. Michael, with his renewed passion, had become a sought-after expert in community-centric development, his corporate polish now tempered with genuine empathy. Amanda, sharper and more grounded than ever, had become a formidable force in real estate law, ensuring Greenrise Development's ethical and sustainable growth. Their children, Emma and Jake, now teenagers, spent their summers interning at Greenrise hubs, learning about community building from their grandmother and parents, carrying the family torch. Even Cyrus Blackwood had become a reluctant ally. After witnessing the undeniable success and community benefits of the Agnes Miller Tower, and seeing his own nephew, Robert, thrive in a new role as Millbrook's city planning director, a direct result of Greenrise's influence, Cyrus had shifted his stance. He now occasionally consulted for Greenrise Development on local land acquisitions, his decades of experience proving unexpectedly valuable. Their relationship remained a complex blend of old rivalries and grudging respect, but the outright opposition had long since faded. He'd even once, in a rare moment of candor, admitted to Agnes over a cup of coffee at the hearth that she had, quote, shown this old dog a new trick or two. Agnes would often sit by the window in her office, gazing out at Millbrook. She saw the new businesses, the bustling sidewalks, the laughter of children playing in the plaza below. She saw the familiar faces of Frank, Gus, and Maria, now proudly wearing their long-term service pins, overseeing the thriving operations of the tower's facilities and guest services. She saw her town revitalized, not by external forces, but by an audacious vision born from an unexpected place, a janitor's uniform and a burning desire to prove that age was just a number. Her golden years were not spent in quiet leisure, but in active purpose. She had not only acquired a building, she had acquired a new life, built a new legacy, and redefined what was possible for herself and her community. She had proven that worth isn't measured by age or past professions, but by courage, vision, and the unwavering belief in one's own capabilities, even when others laugh. Agnes Miller had taken a janitor job at 65, and in doing so, she had owned not just an entire building, but the very concept of what it means to truly live. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.